When I switched to the Oktava MK-012 pencil type microphone as my in-studio main mic mounted out of frame in my different setups that I've used over the last few months, I was always using a shock mount basically made by Røde. However, this shock mount is usually intended to be used with the Røde VideoMic NTG. Now the problem that came up was when I was using the shock mount for the Oktava in my studio, then I don't have any shock mount for the VideoMic NTG to use while vlogging or being out and about. Now that kind of nagged me because the whole point of having a studio setup is having it ready to go whenever I want to start filming and not to have to deconstruct something so that I can do any kind of other video shoots, like for example going outside with the VideoMic NTG. So I had to go out and find a solution for that. Now the first solution was using a shock mount that I actually owned for the purpose of using it for podcasting, specifically with the ATR 2100. Now this is a type of shock mount where you have these bungee cords right here around a circle, and basically you place your microphone in the middle here and then it is held up by these bungee cords. Now, this specific shock mount here is not really made for this type of thin microphone, and you can see that based on the diameter, those are not really made for each other. Now, I have usually just made it work by using, for example, the method to twist the bungee cord a little bit. However, whenever I do that, you can see that there is always something that's not quite perfectly aligned. The other workaround that I used for this specific setup here is to use a couple of other bungee cords and add those to the mix, for example, putting them below like so, and then another one to go around and into the other direction. And that kind of worked, even though it looks kind of ridiculous, but I wanted to have a more robust solution which is also usable long-term and of course gives me the benefit of being able to use it in studio and out of the studio so that I have this here freed up again for the use with the VideoMic NTG. And on that search I came across the Røde SM4-R, and this is the shock mount that I have right here. And the interesting thing here is that basically the Røde shock mount, so the red part at the top right here, is pretty much exactly the same as is with the Røde VideoMic NTG shock mount. The only difference being that you have a different kind of a base plate, you have a couple of more customization options and a cable funnel at the end right there. Now, I got the version that has the mount at the bottom here with this little yoke thing so that you can actually make it so that this is movable. And of course you have the option to screw different things at the bottom, like for example a boom pole or any kind of microphone holder or stand, or also a tripod plate. And in my case, I adapted it down to the smallest tripod kind of situation because I like to use this in combination with, for example, this little cold shoe mount right there, because in my studio here on my overhead mount, I am also using this type of cold shoe mount so that I can mount a light on there or also a microphone like this and have it interchangeable without needing to unscrew or screw something into place. I think that that makes it much more versatile. However, there is also a version of the SM4 which is called the SM3, and in this case you actually have a cold shoe mount here at the bottom, and it basically functions similarly to what you have with the VideoMic NTG version, which has a cold shoe mount at the bottom as well. But I did not go for this despite it having a smaller profile because I want to have the availability to being able to have a boom pole option at the bottom and also to have this kind of like a yoke mount at the top here so that I can bend it or make it so that it is angled toward something. So that's the main reason why I did not go for this version with the cold shoe mount, but rather I spent the money on this one, which gives me more flexibility by adding in a simple adapter to have the same functionality as the version with the cold shoe mount. Now I'm going to include a little bit of a sound comparison between these and how they work and how well they actually don't or do bring over the shocks and the different movements and stuff like that from the microphone holder to the microphone itself. However, before we do that, let's take a little bit of a deeper look at this specific shock mount right here. In the box, you essentially get a couple of screws. You get these two Rycott mounts and you get this little screwdriver because you can actually place these in different places. So as you can see, we have 4 mounting spots, one at the back, then this one, then we have 2 at the front right there. And I chose to go with the frontmost and then the one here at the second to last place. And the reason is that with this short type of microphone, this pencil type microphone, when I now place this into the shock mount, doing it like so, and pushing it a little bit back, doing it into the other one as well. And now I have this shock mounted in there, a little bit front heavy. However, when I want to use a pop filter on top of that, I can now place this on there without any problems and without any issues. Now, if I wanted to have the optimal weight balance and everything like that, I could, of course, just push it a little bit further back and then hold the other one to the front as well. And then you have it nice and balanced like this. And this might give you better results if you, for example, have this mounted inside of a blip. But I cannot really use any pop filter in the front unless I want to just have it a little bit on the top there and not very much pushed to the end. Now you can of course still use the same shock mount also with, for example, something like the Rode VideoMic NTG. Nothing holding you back to do that, and that is how it looks when you place this in there. Oh, there's the USB port. That's why it's complicated. So you would kind of push it on like so. And on this microphone, you actually have little white markings like you have right there, as well as on the front right there. So you can actually align where you want to put your shock mount. And then you have this type of a setup, and that's how this one looks. Also a little bit front heavy, so it would fall over, but it is once again for the purpose of being able to put the wind muff on top of that. And lastly, you also have this little cable management situation at the back right there. If you have an XLR cable, for example, it goes into one of the slots. But if you have thinner cables, like for example a TRS cable, then you also have the option to have that at the back there. And it kind of snaps into place right there and is held there so that you don't have to worry about those cables dangling around. And now I think it is time for the comparison between these different microphone holders, the old one that I was using before, and also I'm going to compare it to the shock mount from the Rode VideoMic NTG, and then of course this SM4-R. Now that test confirms my suspicion, and I am finally able to retire my bungee cord version of a shock mount and also the whole bunch of bungee cords that I used with it. From the sound, it was pretty clear that this is not ideal specifically for this microphone. Now if you get this type of shock mount with the right diameter for the proper microphone, that might be a different story. But I am now of the opinion that probably one of the dedicated shock mounts for the type of microphone that you want to use is probably going to be a better option. Now the difference between these two, the VideoMic NTG shock mount and the SM4-R, was not as strong as of course with the bungee cord version. However, there's one clear differentiation, and that is specifically for the use in this overhead rig right here. I would like to use this one more because it has the cable stopper right there, which in my opinion was one of the factors that added more noise when I was using the Oktava with the XLR cable and the Rode VideoMic NTG shock mount. Because here with the SM4R, you also have the cable stabilized before it goes into the microphone. So more of the cable vibrations and movements are stopped right here and then not transferred over to the microphone. So this here is pretty much going to be permanently mounted here in my studio as my overhead microphone. Let's screw this down. And it's probably going to be mounted out of frame so that you don't see it whenever I use it. Now, in my opinion, the SM4R as well as the SM3R are probably both going to be really good options for shock mounting a pencil type microphone. But if you're doing a lot of handheld work, then you might also want to take a look at the PG2R. And that is the same version of the shock mount, the Rycott shock mounting that the SM4R and the SM3R have. But you have this pistol grip at the bottom. And with that, you have a bit of an easier time hand holding your microphone. And the pistol grip at the bottom also has a boom pole mounting option so that you can use it there as well. Now, in my case, this is mainly intended for in-studio use. The out-of-studio boom pole kind of situation might be something that I want to use it for as well. But then I, of course, can also attach a boom pole to this SM4R. And again, I would choose the SM4R over the SM3R because the option to have a cold shoe is already available with the SM4R as well. But of course, if you want to have the smallest footprint possible, the SM3R is great to attach it to your camera rig, for example, for documentary style filmmaking. Now, if you found this video helpful or entertaining, of course, a thumbs up is always appreciated because it helps out a lot with YouTube algorithm. Then, of course, you will also find the links to these products in the description down below. And if you have any questions, you can ask those in the comment section or on my Discord server, which will be also linked in the description below. Now, with all that said, I hope your microphones are shock mounted, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao!